there, St. John Nicholas, with my friendly bow, the feast of reason and the flow of soul.
Hello and welcome to Feasts of Reason. Today's guest is Mohamed Nabil, an author, marketing consultant, and creator of AIDOP, AI Debates on One's Publications, a project that uses artificial intelligence to rigorously challenge an author's own ideas before they're published. Mohamed has written extensively on topics ranging from political philosophy and global governance to ethical use of AI. And today, we're going to explore his unique approach to using AI not just as a writing assistant, but as a tool for intellectual criticism. Mohamed Nabil, welcome to Feast of Reason.
Hello, Matt. It's great to join you here tonight.
Before we get started, I have to admit, when I initially thought that your ideas about world government would be really the focus of what we would talk about. But after reading some of your work, what really fascinated me wasn't the conclusions as much as the process. So I'd like to start there a little bit. Most people, I think, use, including myself, use AI to reinforce their beliefs. This is a trap I think we can all fall into. And you actually built a system designed to attack yours. Maybe tell us a little bit about how that happened.
So AIDOP, AIDOP, which stands for AI Debates on One's Publications, is a content creation framework by which a content creator prompts an AI tool to criticize their own content, engage in back and forth argumentation, and publish the entire unedited transcript within 24 hours of the exchange. So it's about radical transparency. You're inviting audiences into your lab, and it's about intellectual humility. You don't have a problem. You feel comfortable with the AI outsmarting you in several points. You don't care about that. You're just seeking the truth. And it's about maintaining human sovereignty in the age of AI.
I think that one of the things in my experience with AI is that it seems like you have to, how you prompt it will have a lot to do. There seems to me to be a little bit of an engagement emphasis in the algorithm, which is more inclined to tell you you're fabulous than to criticize you, and you have to be pretty clear about that. And I think just as a comparison, your book, I read some of your book, My Interview with ChatGPT, and it seems when it was sort of asking these questions, they felt a little more softball. Then really completely opposite from on your blog, you published a complete breakdown of a really rather brutal critique of what you did. So how do you go about dealing with that, the prompt issue? How much of a challenge is that?
Yes, it's definitely a challenge because the LLM, the interactions and their responses to your prompts are basically based on the idea that they want you to come back. They want you to stay on the platform. So they look at your historical interactions and they try to give you something that you would like to read. And this is the main challenge. So you have to ask it explicitly to criticize your own content. You have to prompt it explicitly to find all the logical fallacies and the blind spots within a certain argument. This way, you can guarantee that it will come up with the best possible criticism of your content, and you can engage in back and forth argumentation accordingly.
Yeah. Two things about that. One is I remember, I think it was ChatGPT version 3.5. Many people complained that it was, come on, you're just kissing my ass here. I want to, and so they changed it. They took out some of that in ChatGPT 4, and many other people complained. You've taken away my best friend that used to be so nice to me, and now so they've got a balance there from a business perspective. The second thing I was going to say is that I've found that you can tell it be tough, and then it'll be tough, and then you respond to the toughness, and then it'll revert back to being nice again. So do you find that you have to continually remind it, or is it somewhere along the way, does it kind of figure out, no, you really want it to be tough all the time?
It's a matter of how you define the process. So I defined the process of AIDOP. I defined the process on my website, And then when I get into an AIDP session with a tool such as ChatGPT, I mostly use ChatGPT and Gemini. So when I get into an AIDOP session with one of them, I start by giving it my definition of the AIDOP process, how it works, and what are the objectives. And then I ask it to criticize my content accordingly. So this way it stays tough all the way, but it doesn't have the human ego. It doesn't have the problem with sticking to a certain belief all the time. It will
Yeah.
have a logic. It will have handle a logical conversation with you. So that's a great part of debating the LLMs.
So the ADOP, I like that algorithm saying it that way. Excuse me, the is saying it that way. ADOP, is it? It's really a process that you've defined about how to interact with LLMs rather than some code you developed or something that did it. It's really just this is how you should interact with an LLM if you want to get this kind of criticism.
Yes, it's just a process. I
Okay.
defined the process and the methodology at my own website.
And over time, if you're using ADOP, do these LLMs like figure out that you always want it to be that way, or is it something that you do have to, each time you're interacting to remind it that you're of the ADOP process and that you're really looking for harsh criticism?
No, you have to remind it.
Okay, okay.
You
So
have
it's the try to get you back by being nice to you. Part of the algorithm
Yes,
needs
it's a part.
needs to be undone each time. Okay, fair
Yes,
enough. Um,
exactly.
Okay, so that if I was let's imagine I was going to publish a work tomorrow. I had something I thought was ready to go and I thought was just beautiful. How would I use ADOP? What would be your advice? And I know you have this on the website and we'll provide the link, but if you could walk us through that.
Okay, first of all, the goal of these debates isn't to win or lose. The main objectives include stress testing ideas through AI, effectively making them sharper by responding to criticism, refining one's own thoughts, simply accepting criticism as valid, or agreeing to disagree on certain points, inviting readers to explore the mechanisms of the thought process instead of simply asking them to accept conclusions, and documenting where AI tools stand at the time of publication. ADOP turns your work into living texts instead of closed chapters. So it's a process of radical transparency and intellectual humility. You start by asking the AI tool to take a position opposing to yours. Then you engage in back and forth argumentation. You copy paste the whole conversation without editing anything. For free, publicly available content like blog articles and essays, you should copy paste the whole content while asking the AI tool to take an opposing position. But
Mhm.
if your content is hiding behind a paywall, you can depend on the publicly available data to let it form its own criticism. And then you publish the content within 24 hours of the exchange. So
And why that time frame? Is that
to effectively document where one or multiple AI tools stand at the time of publication.
I see. Okay. So what is something that surprised you the most in this interaction? Where is there a time when the AI, an LLM or AI convinced you that you were wrong with something, or do you find it's more that it strengthens your current beliefs and just helps you to refines your arguments? What's the mix there?
Well, I had the biggest surprise for me was when I had an essay related to work-life balance, and then I copy pasted the whole essay and got into an ADOP session with ChatGPT, and then it told me that my own theory, I came up with a theory for work-life balance. It told me that my own theory doesn't work for anyone. It's not a universal theory. It assumes that people are choosing to work too hard, are not being forced to work too hard, and by the circumstances surrounding them.
Mhm.
So I actually accepted the criticism as valid and moved on to the next essay.
So that's an instance where you literally discarded the idea and went on to something else. It was
Yeah. I still
Okay.
believe in my theory, and I still believe it works for certain groups of people, but
Yeah.
doesn't work for everyone. And ChatGPT was right about that.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting because to actually dump something that you worked hard on and move on to something else is a difficult thing for any of us to do. I think most people, certainly speaking for myself, my inclination is if I get good criticism from a human being or from an AI, and I think my thought is, wow, I'm glad almost nobody read that before I went out with it. And so it's interesting to me that you're being so public with the process. Is this an exercise in your own humility, sort of helping you uh, get in touch with your own intellectual humility? Do you think it's part of a process that should be adopted by all, or is it both?
Yes, it's about radical transparency and intellectual humility. And I, I actually collected the rest of my essays and
Hmm.
published them in a book titled "Ideas That Survived AIDOP," because the rest of the essays actually survived this process of AI scrutiny.
Hmm.
And I don't believe this process should be hidden. I believe that open debate and openly debating your own ideas, whether with human beings or with LLMs, allows your audiences to view multiple perspectives at a time. So it's actually about it guarantees more engagement. After
Hmm.
applying after applying ADOP for on various essays of mine, almost all essays on my website, my website became ranked among the top 5% among personal websites established within the last year in terms of daily visitors. So it actually made a difference in terms of exposure. People are into this kind of thing. People want to read multiple perspectives at the time.
And do you think that those interactions in publishing them triggered like search engine optimization or things like that, or that they're just because that it's not. It's hard to imagine people searching a topic like AI criticism of written
Yeah.
works.
No, you actually, it's actually every essay is. This is how I go about it. For example, I have an essay called titled "The Absurdity of Nationalism," and then I have another essay titled "Philosophical Debates with AI: The Absurdity of Nationalism." So I got into a
I see.
philosophical debates with the AI on this topic. So anyone searching for the absurdity of nationalism can find the topic, can find this article.
Right, and either one of them, right, and either one or both, and the fact that they're
Yes.
two and they're kind of interacting with each other would naturally help search engine optimization. That makes sense. Do you think that AI, more broadly, and maybe LLMs more specifically, are better at criticism than they are at creation?
Yes, actually, they are much better at criticism than they are at creation, because at the point where we are today, they have almost the sum of human knowledge. So when you present a new disruptive idea, the best way to get criticism is through one of these LLMs. Uh, but as for creation, it's not too creative nowadays. It's if you ask it to create something, it's just a tool for plagiarism, advanced plagiarism.
Yeah, it does seem to me that there's a line there that's hard to define when if you ask for a critical review of some writing, or even to have it, redraft something. At what point does the voice of the AI start to overtake the voice of the writer? I feel personally like there's a little bit of a slippery slope there, where restating and clarifying ideas that I have, where does that slip into ways of stating things that actually start to make the ideas a little bit more as coming from the AI? Do you navigate that same problem, and how do you control it, or how do you work with it?
I don't have the AI write for me. I don't at any point I don't have it to write on my behalf uh, anything. So I think ghostwriting is unethical. I find it unethical among human beings, and I find it unethical if you're using an LLM. So what I actually do in these ADOP sessions is that I start with its criticism of my own content, and then I respond, and and then I type ChatGPT's response 1, 2, 3, and then I type my own response 1, 2, 3. So it doesn't take over my own voice. It's just a part of the conversation.
Okay, so the every word you type it comes from your fingers and your brain, and although ideas may be shaped and changed in this discussion, to me though there is it is a little grayer area than that. If you work with a professional book editor, they will make suggested changes, and at times even maybe a redraft of a paragraph, or things that are or even different formats. Put this idea first and before this one, and maybe arrange the chapters in this way. And depending on the relationship between the author and the editor, that can either be something like you described, where it's just, hey, just give me some your ideas and criticism, and then I'll totally redraft, or something where it starts to become a little bit more of a collaboration. And I think the same thing does kind of exist with AI, depending on how you use it. But it sounds like your solution has been very just to say no. It's a hard line. Everything I write will be something that I write, and maybe it incorporates ideas as part of these discussions with AI, but the AI is not generating anything.
Yes, exactly. This is where I stand on the issue. And as for the regular relationship with the editor, uh, it it, uh, sometimes it dilutes authorship. You know,
Mm.
your own ideas are your own ideas. You want to express them. You may need the help of someone telling you how to express them better. You may need the help of someone telling you this or that wasn't clear enough. But you don't want someone to inject their own ideas under your own name.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. One of the things you said that struck me is that about AI having almost all human knowledge. That's a pretty rich vein, I think, in my view. One of the things that I've been working and developing is the idea that progress is built less on brilliant individuals and more on kind of collective knowledge and reason. That's really how knowledge increases, and it's how societies have developed into healthier, happier, more productive lives for their citizens, and all that is kind of based under this umbrella of the process of reason. But that collective knowledge, that collective reason, now is AI something that can start to take on that kind of a role. In other words, you're an individual, and you create something using your individual reason, and then you could go out to a bunch of human beings who are maybe experts in the field or whatever you're doing and get critical review, and or you can go to AI. So do you see AI as being able to step into effectively that role of collective reason?
Yes, I believe so. And they have the idea of AIDOP or using AI to criticize your own content and getting into back and forth argumentation doesn't replace human to human debate. Human to human debate is still essential, but it can
Hmm.
act as a complementary feature. You have you you can start with, instead of starting with a simple thesis of mine or a theory and telling you about it, I can tell you, okay, here is my theory or my idea, and here are the back and forth arguments between me and AI on that idea. Let's start from there. So
Okay, I please go on.
so it actually enforces human-to-human debate. It doesn't weaken the idea of debating another human being on your own thoughts.
One of the things about that, about the tapping into the internet more broadly and AI's scrubbing of the internet to as its data set, is that you have to depend upon the AI's ability to rank the quality of information, the accuracy of information that it's getting and delivering you. And we all know that sometimes it does make mistakes. Although I would argue, in my experience, that um, the quality of information you get from interacting with ChatGPT is at least as good, if not better, than what you get from Google, because all kinds of reasons that have to do with the internet. But the point being that they're in collective reason. If you're dealing with an institution that has self-correcting mechanisms, that is say whether it's a scientific organization or a government body, or a journalistic organization. Um, there's a process in place that is at least fairly visible about how they are, and they build their credibility based on their ability to find problems. And so, to do that with AI, it seems to me that we are taking, not for granted, but it displays a confidence in the AI's ability to parse out that information. Is that something that concerns you?
Yeah, the idea of the idea of relying on AI, that's cool. We can rely on LLMs, but then we have to also use search engines. We have to use all of the
Hmm.
tools available. Uh, search search engines have their limitations, and the LLMs have their own limitations. Uh, but you can still dig deeper to find the truth. You have tools today that we didn't have 10 years ago or 100 years ago. We can, if we're truly seeking the truth, maybe we can find it through these various tools.
Yeah, I think one of the fairly recent enhancements, I think it was the last couple of years, that ChatGPT did, was to include the links that it's using as sources, to include the sources. And it made it possible to say, when it comes up with something, you say, well, okay, how did you come up with that? And you can click on some things and start to, verify what they've got. And using that method, I've certainly found some things that's like, that's not exactly what this link says. So you have to do that. The other thing I'd say about humans versus AI is, one of the things I talk about a lot in my book is about what I call conversational failures. And there are all kinds of ways at all kinds of levels that conversations between human beings fail. And one of the big reasons is identity. And we're living in a world, we're getting more and more polarized, and people are, I think, Yuval Noah Harari said that in his book Nexus, that we have the most advanced communication technology in the history of the world, and we don't know how to talk to each other anymore, something like that. And I think the problem, in my view, is a lot of times two people don't have a conversation, two identities do, and they just kind of spout the rhetoric that's related to their identity. So one of the things I find um, really powerful and satisfying about interacting with an AI is that it doesn't have an identity. It doesn't, I'm not going to piss it off. It's not going to, go on X and cancel me because it didn't like something that I said. So there's a freedom of interaction there. And this is, of course, leads to all sorts of things where people start to think of the AI as a person, right? Which, of course, it isn't. But do you find that same freedom, and do you find that different and more challenging in dealing with people because of basically identities and deeply held beliefs and social norms that they have?
Yes, and actually this may get me to another point of mine. I codified Enlightened Populism back in 2021, Enlightened populism is a behavioral pattern of communication that involves listening to multiple experts, trying to understand how they reach certain conclusions, and investigating the information to discern the truth. It contrasts with the two dominant behavioral patterns of communication in today's world: blind elitism, which entails blindly following an expert or an elite on a certain issue, and
Yeah.
ignorant populism, which also involves the absence of investigation while relying on feelings or trends.
So I'm steel manning this a little bit and kind of putting it into the language I use, but would ignorant populism be more kind of tribal loyalty and social, where it's not nobody's thinking anything through. They're just saying the stuff that the people around them say to get that social reinforcement. And enlightened populism would be something where there's more analysis that led them to that position, and more of that kind of collective reasoning with AIs or humans.
Yes, exactly. Enlightened populism involves listening to multiple experts, trying to understand how they reach certain conclusions, and investigating the information to discern the truth. So,
So it sound Go on. I'm sorry.
so you don't blindly follow a certain expert on a certain issue, and at the same time, you don't
hmm
follow a trend or a feeling. You you investigate for the truth.
So how would you just in that context? How would you define populism?
So, populism, I defined it as a, uh, um, a mass communication strategy. So I define populism as a mass communication strategy. So ignorant populism would be ignorance attached to the masses, and enlightened populism would be enlightenment attached to the masses.
So but if we're thinking about an individual, I mean, I'm assuming there is such a thing then as an ignorant populist and an enlightened populist. And
Exactly.
what are the differences between those two people? Are there specific beliefs that one believes or the other, or does it more have to do with the process of how they arrived at those beliefs?
The process of arriving at beliefs and continuously questioning every belief they have and every idea they have.
So, let's say in the context of well, we'll use your country, but correct me if I'm misstating it. It would be possible then to have an enlightened populist who, through lots of study and analysis and talking with people, decided that a Muslim theocracy was the right way to run Egypt. And another person could also be an enlightened populist who went through the same process and came up with, no, we need a totally non-theological democracy. Is that possible?
I, I I believe anything is possible, but it depends on your investigation process. You own your own investigation process and you own your own conclusions.
I see. So how does one distinguish between an ignorant populist and an enlightened populist? I mean, there's certainly in my country, and
Hmm.
I think all over the world, there are plenty of people who I think you could make a pretty good argument are pretty ignorant, who think they're enlightened, who believe they have. I know some people personally who are staggeringly uh, ignorant, in fact, really deluded about really the nature of reality, but who believe that they are the ones who have the real story. They are the enlightened ones, and that everyone else is confused. So I wonder. I'm not really clear on how to use this definition of an ignorant populist versus an enlightened populist, given that someone can just claim that they're an enlightened populist even if they're objectively ignorant.
Yes, it's a complicated process. So it's it's easier to take an example. Let's talk about climate change, for instance. You've got uh, you've got people you've got all over the news reports telling you that the Paris Agreement was a great achievement. So a blind elitist would follow this expert's opinion blindly and accept this as a matter of fact. believe that the Paris Agreement is wonderful. And an ignorant populist on the other side would follow the widespread trends online that stuff like Earth has been overheating for thousands of years, and this is a natural process and has nothing to do with the industrialization process. And this is, in fact, nonsense, but it's widespread nonsense. So this is ignorant populism. So an enlightened populist would perfectly do what? They will look at the science and look at the actual text of the Paris Agreement and realize that it's almost useless. It's only a symbolic agreement that acknowledges the fact that there is a climate threat and that we should do something about it, but it doesn't actually do anything about it. So instead of blindly following an expert telling you that the Paris Agreement is perfect, and instead of blindly following a group of people online telling you that there's nothing wrong with Earth, we have to go back to the science of it all.
Yeah. Okay. So I think just to paraphrase that, you could be an ignorant populist who just because I grew up in Berkeley, California. I live in Santa Cruz, California. It is about as deep blue bubble as you can get, and pretty much you would have a hard time finding people who are climate skeptics, right? But I think the vast majority of those people don't know what's in the Paris Agreement and certainly haven't studied the climate science. They're accepting this mostly from a social standpoint. This is what all my friends say, and when I say it, people nod their heads and pour me another glass of wine. So I'm going to keep saying that. And then, of course, on the other side, you go out to other parts of the country, and there are places where people say crazy things like it's a Chinese hoax. I do think there's a difference in that someone who is an ignorant populist who, and without studying the science, accepts the scientific consensus that climate change poses a threat, and that it is man-made, right? That their human activity is a contribution to it. They are accepting the scientific consensus that a bunch of experts who have argued with each other and gone back and forth, and there's a wide variety of different reports that studies that go from complete disaster to it could be pretty bad to well, it's really not much of anything, but the overall consensus, that process of collective reason, makes it pretty clear that there's a risk. And so I do think there may be different levels of ignorant populism. I personally don't think, and for myself, I don't. And I'm in the middle of a similar debate with my father, which is this is interesting to me, who is much more of a climate skeptic than I am, and by no means an ignorant person. He is a very, very educated, very, very knowledgeable, more so than me. He knows more about the climate science and the study more than I have, and yet has come to this very different conclusion. I think that the embrace of of knowledge, which I think knowledge is collectively held. This is something that is many, many people using the process of reason or arguing with each other in all these different areas of domain. And I think accepting that consensus as being the best current explanation is a reasonable thing to do. Whereas, just getting nonsense feeds stuff from your Facebook page and then making conclusions, that's like a different level of ignorance. Sorry, that's a long frame, but do you see what I'm getting at?
Yes, I see what you're getting at, but we have to realize that experts sometimes could be wrong. They are not currently wrong on climate change. I don't think they're wrong on climate change, but historically they have been wrong on other issues like eugenics, for example. So this is why we have to investigate the information to discover the truth. We have to listen to multiple experts, try to understand how they reach certain conclusions, and investigate the truth, investigate the information to discover the truth.
This is a kind of the crux of the conversation with my father, but it's relevant to what we're talking about here. What is the responsibility of an individual to try to assess where we are in the process? So if we assume that there's a process that's going on, again, take climate change as an example, where we're trying to figure out just what the level of damage could be and what we could potentially do about it. What is the responsibility of an individual who is not an expert in the field to try to understand what is realistic to expect an individual to understand about where we are in the process?
So this could take us to my third proposal for humanity
Hmm.
about world governance. I believe we should unite this planet under a single government with equal rights for all, to be ruled by citizen assemblies. So people have to study multiple issues to be capable of. They have to practice enlightened populism and study multiple issues to be capable of voting directly instead of relying on representative democracies.
So I think the one of the things I talk about in my book is the overview effect, and this is what happens when astronauts are in space and they can see the whole Earth. And one of they have these. It's a very common reaction that they have, where it's like they're looking at the globe for the first time and there are no borders. You can't see the little
Exactly.
lines on it that you see on the map, and they
Exactly.
have this. They have a similar kind of revelation. It's like, well, we should have a, we're all one. We're all on this pale blue dot that's sitting out in the middle of space. We should, we should be one. So I love that idea, and I think it is the ultimate goal of collective reason. I would argue that is if that is going to happen at all, it's certainly not going to happen in time to do what we need to do about climate change. I mean, I think to get China and Iran and the United States
Mhm.
and all of these and Italy
Mhm.
or Greece. I spent some time in Greece. Man, those people, they love their country and their identity. To get them to give up their national identity, I think would be a big long term project. So I'm not sure that that's going to help us with what we need to do to address climate change.
Yes, this is actually on point, but we can walk in parallel paths at the same time. We can work toward achieving multiple goals at the same time. The long-term
Yes.
goal, the long-term goal, which shall be a bottom-up transition, we need a world government. This is a long-term goal. Now, in the short term, we need to address climate change. So any kind of climate change activism, anything related to climate action or climate justice, should be supported. This is the short term, and this is the long term. So,
Yeah.
climate change is here to stay. Actually, it's not. We need speedy action and everything, but it's here to stay for decades and maybe centuries.
Yeah. Yeah, we have as you and I are speaking. The weather's very mild where I am out on the California coast, but the east coast of the United States is experiencing like over 40 degree for you 40 degree temperatures, which is probably just Tuesday for you, right? You're used to hot weather, but it's the east coast is melting. And yes, I think I would get back though to my original question. We take it in the context of this future idea of a world government and an enlightened population. When you think about how human knowledge has, so if you go back to a hunter gatherer tribe, right? We go all the way back there, and you've got pretty much the collective knowledge is shared by everybody. There might be, a person in the tribe who's particularly good at making baskets, and another one who's maybe a particularly good hunter. But basically, pretty much everybody knows how to do everything that everybody knows how to do. And now that's grown into this world where we have this incredible amount of knowledge that has to be spread across millions and millions of people in billions of people in ever narrower domains of expertise. And inside those little silos, those little vertical silos, there's all kinds of debate and back and forth and trying to figure out, working toward using the process of reason to work toward the truth, toward better and better explanations. As you said, right, there are all sorts of things that we used to believe that we've figured out were wrong. And that's the process that we use to what I call move the fork forward, move the fork of knowledge forward. So how, if you get to this, what does the enlightened population of the future look like? How much would we expect that enlightened population to know about all of these different uh, narrow and incredibly complicated areas of expertise that governments have to make decisions about?
So this is actually a very important question. The enlightened populists of the future can prioritize their learning areas. They can learn about certain issues that take the priorities, say, for instance, climate change, pandemics, and stuff like that. These are the priorities, these are existential threats. And then other threats or other issues can be down the priority list. So you'll have to prioritize, each individual will have to prioritize their own interests in terms of learning. And as you said, there are many debates within each field, and there are endless areas of specialization. Yet, the, the enlightened populist of the future can tackle these areas effectively by listening to multiple experts, trying to understand how they reach central conclusions, and investigating the information to discern the truth. So it shall be all a matter of priorities.
Well, who sets the priorities? Like, let's say that I'm an enlightened citizen of the future, and I am really into hydroponic growing hydroponic vegetables, growing food, and maybe even particular kinds of vegetables. And I just really dive into that and learn, everything there is to know about it, even if I do something else for a living. So I am, got a pretty good level of expertise and knowledge of what's going on in that field. Do I then vote on issues like vaccines and the amount of nuclear weapons we should have?
Yes, you should, because you as an individual as an enlightened individual, can realize the simple fact that these are important issues that may affect your life, your own life, and the lives of those around you. So then you take the logical step of studying a little bit of that and studying a little bit of this.
Well, I guess my point is that that mythical enlightened person of the future I was talking about might really be able to make a good decision about whether we should incentivize growing this type of carrot or that type of carrot because they do better in a hydroponic environment, but wouldn't have any idea about what really is the best. How do I evaluate the motives of competing proposals for, say, how to reduce nuclear weapons or increase them, right? If there's a debate about that, how would I do that when I'm the carrot expert?
Well, if you'll have two basic options. Either you have enough time and energy to spend on studying this issue, so you'll actually come up with your own opinion and vote accordingly, or you can abstain. In a direct democracy, you can choose not to vote on a certain issue because you don't have enough knowledge.
Yeah, I wish that happened more. I think maybe nobody would turn out. I think the one of the things in my book and something I talk about a lot is this more modern views of psychology and evolutionary psychologists, people like Jonathan Haidt and Daniel Kahneman, who talk about really the limits of individual reason. And that, so you go back to David Hume, the 17th century 18th century, 18th century English philosopher who said, reason is and always must be the slave of the passions. It isn't that bad, but it's pretty bad. We have as individuals inside the walls of our own mind, we have so much bias, so many of these social cues and all these things that affect our ability to really reason. And it's really why, if you take the step back, I think that the process of collective reason is really what has moved humanity forward. It's that exactly what you talk about with what you do with AI and what you do with other people is having those ideas challenged. But I think that that's actually a pretty rare trait in people. So my feeling in what and was kind of central to what I'm doing is that what we need to believe in and lean into is collective reason and belief in that process, that it's actually happening and having a result. So to take my carrot farmer, my carrot farmer would have really strong views about the carrots, but when it comes to the other things, it would say, well, I think the some really smart people are banging this out, and I'm gonna trust the view of the consensus. I'm going to trust the consensus that emerges, and I can't. I have to be humble about making a determination of where it's at and what's right now, because I simply don't know enough.
Well, if I'm in that position, if they are voting on an issue that I'm not knowledgeable about, and I don't have the time and energy to get into the specific details of this issue and study it well enough, I just abstain. I'll not trust anyone blindly, even the consensus, even the expert consensus, and I'm not going to follow a certain trend in order to just get a vote out. I'll just abstain.
Yeah, and I would like to think that I would do that too. Although I definitely feel the pull. Right, I talked about that. This deep blue bubble I've grown up in and still live in. There's a strong emotional pull to align myself with those positions, and it's a very difficult thing to do. I mean, and maybe this just boils down to you have a greater faith in the individual's human's ability to do that than I do. I mean, I look at my country right now. We have some really big issues going on and some really big problems, but what seems to be defining the political what's going to be the big issue apparently in the big election we have in November is how much gas costs. So
Mhm.
I think people, and this again gets back to the Jonathan Haidt and Daniel Kahneman. I think that we're so driven by emotion and instinct that we just and we're so consumed with our own self-interest, our own narrow self-interest, that is very difficult for us to pull back and really see the big picture. And in fact, Jonathan Haidt's analogy of an emotional, instinctual elephant that's got a reasoning rider on top of it, and that basically that reasoning rider almost all the time just creates rationalizations for what the elephant wanted to do. So, you're mad at gas prices and you don't like inflation. And so therefore I don't like the Republican Party because they're in charge. And a year ago, or not a year ago, 2 years ago, you didn't like the Democratic Party for basically the same reason. So it's kind of and that seems to be that's the group of people, the kind of people in the middle that decide elections in this country. And I don't have very much faith in their ability to either reason out what is the right thing to do or to abstain if they don't think they know enough.
Well, I believe you took us toward the example of the specific example of the United States and its elections. So
Yeah.
I tend to follow the political situation in the United States because it's super
I'm
entertaining.
sorry about that. I'm sorry that you that you have to be
Ah,
subjected to that.
no, it's okay. I follow it regularly because it's super entertaining. It's the world's premium show of politics. You
Yes, we
actually
have a reality star as our president, so that makes sense.
yes, exactly. You have everyone in the country, almost everyone in the country knows that both parties are owned by billionaires. Almost
Yeah,
everyone
yeah.
realizes this simple fact. And almost everyone knows that the main policies are not going to change anytime soon because of the fact that those parties are owned by billionaires. Yet they manage to get you into this gameplay of red versus blue by mainly focusing on social issues, LGBTQ plus rights, abortion, and stuff like that. These are the main topics to tackle, along with the economic factors, the stuff like what you said, the price of gas.
Yeah. There was a musician, American musician named Frank Zappa, who I think in the 1970s said that politics is the entertainment division of the military-industrial complex, which is kind of along the lines of what you're saying. So I think that would you say that AI, your interactions with AI, have made you more humble?
Yes, I'd say so, but you have to have the basic factor of intellectual humility in order to get into that, in order to get into
Yeah,
the idea of publishing your own debates with AI in front of people. As you previously mentioned, it, you, you usually, as a human being, you usually get a certain idea, and if it's not good enough, you're thankful that it didn't get published.
yeah, yeah.
So
There's let's go. I'm sorry. Go on.
so it's I'm actually doing the opposite and inviting other people, other content creators, to do the opposite thing, to invite audiences into their own labs by establishing radical transparency and intellectual humility.
Yeah. I think intellectual humility is extremely important in my work too. There's actually an analogy I use that kind of ties together some of the things we've talked about, which is I call it the fork in the road. So there's a point where it's not an exact point, because knowledge is always provisional. It could be new information that comes along, but our current best explanations. And there's an individual fork, and that's where a person. Say my fork is this is all the stuff that I know pretty well, or that I'm pretty solid on. But then there's a collective fork, which is all of the things that humanity knows. What are our best explanations for everything? And this is kind of what you're pointing to, with saying, look, if you dig into this and look at the facts and see what the consensus is, see what the studies are saying, you can kind of come up with roughly where we are. And I think that getting back to that kind of hunter-gatherer example, the knowledge in a hunter-gatherer tribe versus how it is today, that the fork, the distance between anybody's individual fork and the collective fork has gotten massive. And because of that, there has to be this not only specialization that happens, but there has to be a quality control mechanism. And my argument is that quality control mechanism is the process of reason. We are forced to trust that all of these things are happening. We do this every day. The smartphone is my favorite example. There are people who really know smartphones, but what they really know is where to put their finger on the screen. And they probably couldn't tell you how the screen even knows what where their finger is going and how hard it's pressing and all that. They wouldn't be able to tell you that, let alone this incredible technological stack that thing is connected to, and the amazing network it's connected to, and the centuries of advancements in science and mathematics and technology that led to this device that we all carry around in our pocket that does this. So we're using a very, very tiny slice of our own knowledge, where we put our finger, to access this incredible canon of human knowledge. And I think that to me is what is a cornerstone of intellectual humility, is recognizing that fact, how much we depend upon collective knowledge, and being humble about that, but also grateful for it.
Yes, but the thing is, for example, your example about the person who knows too much about carrots.
Yeah.
If I'm going to plant carrots one day, I'll ask that person and a few other people who have the same level of knowledge, treat them like as experts. Then I'll try to use the awesome thing that is the smartphones we have today, and I'll research the topic on my own, so I can make the best decisions before getting involved into carrot planting.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, and you're leveraging the power of that. So you start off without maybe knowing much about carrots, and with a little bit of work, you can find out what you need to know to get what you want out of carrots. You're not starting a 10,000 square foot hydroponic carrot farm. You want to plant a few carrots in your yard, and so you can glean the information you need to get done what you want to do. And I think that's a great example of that we're leveraging. You haven't made yourself a world renowned carrot expert, but you've learned what you need to know to get what you need to do with carrots. I think it gets more. They're more complicated geopolitical issues, right? Where it's that laying that responsibility on individuals, I think, becomes a little bit tougher. One of the things I want to touch on before we wrap up, though, is you've talked about wanting to institute a billionaire wealth gap. So, in other words, saying that there just shouldn't be any billionaires. And tell me a little bit about that and how something like that might work.
So I basically would like to establish basic human rights such as shelter, access to clean water and food, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and stable, speedy internet connections. To make that possible, I'd like to tax billionaires out of existence, because by setting a wealth cap at $999 million, this is mainly due to two issues. First, two reasons. First, to be able to fund the basic human rights, and secondly, because no one should have this amount of power. No one should have this amount of sovereignty. So, taxing billionaires out of existence, abolishing monarchies and military-industrial complexes, because we'll be unified in a stronger world. These three measures will allow us to have trillions of dollars, so we can establish basic human rights such as access to clean water and food, shelter, education, healthcare, and stuff like that.
Now it seems to me that there are two problems there that you're trying to solve. One is just the unequal distribution of wealth, so that there are all kinds of things that we should be doing for others that we can't do because all the money is so top heavy with these super rich people. But I think the second problem is the influence, the political influence that that these really rich people have, that they can actually get access to and effectively control. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, that's a fair assessment. Exactly.
I guess I would argue that you're never going to get the first one, which is the the unequal, be able to tax and make anything happen, if you don't take care of the second one. I think the first, at least speaking in the context of my country, right? It's we just had a Supreme Court ruling this week, which has lifted what meager limits there were on political contributions. So it's absolutely no holds barred, and I think it's hard to get anything done in almost any subject with the level of money that we have in politics. So I think I would argue that the second one of addressing the inequality of wealth distribution and getting some funds, coming up with the money to be able to help support people who need support, is not going to happen unless you get the money out of politics, unless you regulate the control first, and that's a more complicated issue. It could another episode, really.
Yes, sure. That's okay. This
Is
can be
there a similar
discussed.
situation in Egypt? Do you have a similar situation where they're rich, entrenched players who control the government, or is the problem's different there?
Yeah, the problem is a little bit different here. The way I view it, we live under a unipolar system. The U.S. government controls the rest of the governments all around the world, and the U.S. government is actually bought by billionaires. So billionaires have the right to influence, or not the right, have the actual ability to influence any political decisions anywhere around the world. So that's basically it. So they don't really need to buy officials from Egyptian representatives, because Egyptian representatives are not that powerful like holding an office in the US.
Yeah, at the moment, there's really only one office in the U.S. that seems to be holding and wielding the power. That's a little different situation. I think one of the kind of a wrap up question I'd like to ask you is: is there a question that you've spent years thinking about that you don't feel you've quite gotten an answer from AI yet? Is there still something you're kind of that it hasn't helped you answer, hasn't gotten you to the point? Are you still trying to figure out how to some important question?
Yes, and I don't expect it to come out from AI. I expect it to come out from my own brain.
Mm.
The idea of okay, so I don't know whether you agree with me, but I think you do agree that we need this world government. So how do you get there in terms of organization? This is what I'm working on for my next project.
I see. So that's a complicated issue. I would say that there's the organization part of it, but I think what you said, the how to get there, that to me seems like the toughest nut to crack. But yeah, I agree that's a I don't know if I go so far as to say a utopian ideal, but I think it is, in my mind, the logical conclusion of the process that we've gone through from, tribal to communities to monarchies to, this ever improving representative democracies, which we're, kind of slipping a little bit at the moment, but that's another subject. Well, listen, this has been a fantastic conversation. I want to give you a minute here to tell people where they can find you and learn more about what you're doing. I will include some links in the description of the podcast, but maybe just give us a little overview of where to find you.
Okay, so basically you can find about my writings and my philosophies on mohamednabil.world, MohammedNabil.world. You can, if you can add the description, add the link in the description, that would be helpful. And that's it.
Mm-hmm. I will do that. That's great. Well, and that'll lead to all of your social and other things as well. Well, listen, thank you so much. Again, it's been a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. And I hope we'll stay in touch.
Thank you for having me. I'm sure we'll stay in touch.